I'd like to welcome you all to the first of the salons about the 30th anniversary of RiverLink. My name is Dick Hall, and I'm a former chairman of the board and current member of the board. And happy to have three of the people that were fundamental in the founding of this organization. And I'm going to start off and let them tell us about what their initial involvement with RiverLink was, and we'll go from there. So, Jean, we'll start with you.
Okay. I don't think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to everybody introduce themselves? Because maybe not everybody knows who everybody is.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Jean Webb, and have been on the RiverLink board and been involved for 30 years plus, and I'm delighted to be here with you to share whatever I can with you.
I'm Luther Smith. I'm a landscape architect out of Hendersonville. But about 30 years ago, I was invited to become part of a committee. Didn't know what they wanted to do other than the fact they wanted to keep tourists in Asheville for one more day. And he was responsible for that committee. But what that has grown into is what we now have as RiverLink. And it's been a privilege for 30 years to be involved in it, and especially with this lady and this lady.
Okay. My name's Bob Kendrick. Currently I'm a self-employed business consultant working in kind of economic development. But 30 years ago I worked for the Asheville Area Chamber, and we recognized that we had an underutilized resource in the French Broad, at that time very underutilized, and that we as a business federation needed to kind of put some energy and effort behind seeing what the potential and opportunities were for the river. So I guess my claim to fame was after we started, I guess through a small grant we had, that we were fortunate enough to get Karen Craig Nolan to take a small part-time short tenured job to kind of help us put some things together. And as soon as she finishes spending that original $10,000 grant, we're going to let her go. So I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah.
Glad to be here today.
Okay. I think going back to the beginning, in '74, the federal government passed the Clean Water Act, and I think that's the first time that the waterways began to get some attention from the way they were. And here in Asheville, some of y'all may be familiar, there was a governmental body called Land to Sky Regional Council with Henderson, Transylvania, Buncombe, and Madison County. And so federal funds came through for each county to build a vote access. That's kind of how things got started. Of course, the act also got the governments interested and demanded that we begin to look at the pollution and water quality. So the Land to Sky, most of the people on that were commissioners. They knew they weren't going to keep things going, so they turned to trying to form some kind of a volunteer organization to try to keep the momentum going. And out of that came a body called the French Broad River Foundation. And that's where I got involved in that. We used Land to Sky resources. We used Bill Aker, who was a member of Land to Sky, one of his drawers in his desk. And we were a very loose organization. We did have people from each county, but they were, which is nothing wrong, but they were paddlers. So we were typically volunteers, paddlers, environmentalists with no real say. And so we kept going together, and we figured that what we needed to do was try to develop the awareness for the river. And we did that by each county tried to hold a river fest, which quite often were very, small events, but it was a beginning. And we'd have river cleanup. So that was really kind of where we were. As Bob just said, he was with the chamber. Meanwhile, that we were struggling, trying to keep our organization going. The chamber was trying to come up with some ideas to think about the river. And so we joined forces with the chamber and got their background and their push. And that's when, as you said, we hired Karen. And after, yes.
And I had to give her one of my desk drawers so she would have a place to work.
And we came up with the name RiverLink, and that was for various reasons, to try to link the 4 counties together. If we in Asheville could come up with some projects, what we wanted to do was for them to be demonstration projects for the other counties, and so they could do some of the things that we were doing. So that's one reason that we came up with the word RiverLink. Through the years, one of the things that we knew we needed to do, and that Karen, in her wisdom, pushed, was we need to get on the river. We need to be on the river. And that's when we got, with the help of the owners of this building and with help from people in the community, that we bought this building, or, well, we now have paid for it. But and so we were down here. And, when we came down here, there wasn't anything. And this building had been an old feed store, and an artist had used it for a print shop. And when we were down here, it was just us. There weren't other things going on. And but that was indicative of the beginning, the foresight that Karen had, that we needed a presence on the river. We shouldn't be saying, oh, the river's great, but we're, uptown in the chamber office. So that's how I got. I'm not a paddler. I love the river, and I love to canoe, but I don't think you would want me, as your helmsman. But okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about the chamber and your initial involvement?
Okay. Again, I think and again, I need to give credit to the fellow that was the director of the chamber, Garrett Alderfer, who maybe somebody in here remembers Garrett. Yes, Karen. He was had enough foresight that, and let me set a stage for you. In 84, 85, 86, the downtown was empty. I mean, at a 5:15, you could roll a bowling ball down Haywood Street, and when it got to the S&W building, it would stop, but it wouldn't hit anything along the way. I remember there was 2, maybe 3 good restaurants in the downtown. And I remember when TK Trips, if anybody remembers, they said, "Oh, that won't survive. You can't have a restaurant like that in the downtown." Well, they weren't very forward thinking because we got a lot going on downtown. But at that time frame, those pushes had started. The beginning of the Grove Arcade, the Pack Square, and other investments in the downtown. So the chamber said, well, we've got a resource here, and if I remember, and I don't remember, but if I'll guess, it was like the Riverfront Attractions Committee was what it was. And then we looked at things like what's going on in Denver and what's going on in Charleston and Savannah, and in Washington there was the Torpedo Factory, which was an attraction that tourists could go to and enjoy. So that was the original impetus for Riverfront Attractions. And my perspective, even though we have a very talented landscape architect and a guy who knows a little something about it, my focus was on the business side. Small business development. How can we get more business interest, because the Chamber is a business federation? And as much as we enjoyed and recognized quality of life was what made Asheville what it is, that we realized that there was a business focus too. So my involvement was to guide it toward that way. As much as water quality and cleanliness and parks and recreation are important, it's the business investment. So that was the original thrust, to come in with the tie with the chamber and what had been the foundation. And I agree, when we formed RiverLink, conceptually the idea was, there's an opportunity. It's going to take a long time. Honestly, I knew it would take a long time. Honestly, I didn't think it was going to take 25 years, but that's the way it goes. And we said we need a structure. We need connections with the downtown and the city. We need a way to accept donations and a physical structure. So several of us sat around and went to the trouble and incorporated RiverLink to lead that fight forward. And as much as it's a 4-county area, the original thrust was to recognize, as many of us do, so goes Asheville, so goes the region. And it's always had that kind of a relationship. So the focus at that time was, even though we're long threaded, that the real development, capital investment is probably going to start and occur in the Asheville market. So that was, what we're seeing today is an outgrowth of the visions that we had 30 years ago.
Thank you.
And I think I'm going to roll it over to the designer.
Yes. Luther, tell us a little bit about your beginnings.
I guess my beginnings, I was aware, I moved up here in the late 70s, and my introduction to the river and all of my relationship with the river was primarily in Henderson County. And the world sort of stopped somewhere around Mills River, and you took your canoe out and went back up to Rosman or somewhere and enjoyed the river coming back down. It wasn't until I was made aware of this little group that was forming over here in Asheville and had an idea about using the river that I took the opportunity to walk in the door and listen to what they were saying. I said, I think I'd like to be a part of it. And out of that, I spent the next, about 6-7 years as we went through the plan developing and everything else with the riverfront plan. I've continued to stay sort of involved with RiverLink, but it's just been in the past 30 years, we're talking about 30 years, that's a long time. You got to remember all the things you did 30 years ago so we can get it on tape. Jeez, I have a hard time remembering 2 weeks ago. But it was a very interesting adventure. We went from having a nice little warm office in, I guess it was the Chamber of Commerce building, to a room in one of the buildings down the road here that didn't have a lock on the door, didn't have any heat, didn't have any windows. It had a bathroom, but if you wanted to flush it, you took a bucket next door and got a bucket of water. But it was free. And,
Free is good.
Huh?
Free is good.
Yeah. And, but out of there, it was literally, having a table and people coming and going and sitting around and talking. What can we do to get something started down here? And I was aware of a program that the architecture, the AIA has, and it's called UDAT, Urban Design Assistance Team. Thank you. And what they do as an organization is they could be invited into a community to address a particular issue, and they bring a lot of different people with specialties and come up with a plan based on what the program is. One of their more, depends on who you talk to, famous or infamous plans was they did a thing for, I think it's Helena, Montana, and suggested the whole town move before it ended up in the coal tunnels under the town. And they have moved a portion of it over the years. But anyway, but we were familiar with that, and at the same time, the American Society of Landscape Architects had a similar program that they were just getting off the ground. So we said, well, why don't we take the best of both groups? And a gentleman who was professor at NC State at that time, Peter Batchelor, was the senior organization person for UDATs in the eastern part of the country. And so we went and talked to Peter and said, this is what we want to do. We want to do the first ever combined architecture and landscape architecture assistance team. And the problem is going to be coming up with a course of action to make the river an attraction in Asheville, to bring in people, business development, and we did that. The program, the charrette itself lasted, about 8 days total from the time everybody's showing up. Very intense design work, tours of the river. We broke the team down into sub-teams. Somebody would be looking at transportation, somebody else would be looking at economic development and so forth. And out of that came the riverfront plan, which most of you are probably aware of. And it probably took 3 times the amount of time to turn it from what the team left here to that booklet. I mean, a number of us spent a lot of long nights trying to figure out how to put all that information into one little booklet. But it gave the community, it gave RiverLink something to put on the table and say, these are the opportunities, not the only opportunities, but these are some of the opportunities that we see as citizens, as designers. And we had people in that team from all over the eastern part of the United States. It wasn't just people here from Asheville or North Carolina and so forth. These were people from everywhere, came to be a part of this program and come up with the riverfront plan. And subsequently, as the plan began to develop into reality, then RiverLink said, well, if we're going to do this, we can't just tell somebody, well, go out there and build a fishing pier on the edge of the river. We need to tell them how that fishing pier needs to be built and how it works with the environment and the character of the river and everything else. And so we held a second charrette, and that's where all these riverfront open space design guidelines. So now we could go. I say we, meaning RiverLink, could go to a group and say, "You want to do something on the river? Here's where it can fit in the plan. And by the way, here's all the details of how it needs to be done, so we don't step on somebody's toes." You know? And that's sort of how the whole thing, at least in my remembrance, how the whole thing began to come together and began to grow. We still worked for a couple years out of our little one room with no heat and everything until, as Gene said, we were blessed in terms of getting this building. I think the first time I walked in here, I didn't know they were, whether they'd been blessed or not. But, a lot of interesting stuff hiding in a grain factory. You know, it's been closed for 20 years or 30 years.
What year was that?
91?
Yeah, somewhere around
91, I thought.
91, 92.
Any question on dates? Defer them to Karen.
Right.
'Cause we all say, "Oh, that was before."
Sometime back there. But it
When did you start tying to Wilma Dykeman?
Well, from the beginning.
yeah, I think
I
from
think
the
that was
beginning
always
because
the Bible.
she had
Yeah.
the book on the river, and
She was always a
yes,
member.
she was
Yeah, I know
involved
the
with
book,
the French Broad, or the group that you had and so forth.
What was the foundation?
Yeah.
And Wilma was, I mean, she was keenly interested in what we were doing, and if we would have a fundraiser, she'd come and be the speaker when we went for the river.
American Heritage River.
Yeah, we were applied for that to, and Wilma went to Washington with Karen, and she's just been a partner from the beginning.
Yeah, and once we got the plan, then the trick was how do you start doing something, and as part of the build up towards the charrette and getting the plan, Karen orchestrated, I'll say, art contests with the elementary school kids and so forth. We took over one of the Haywood Park Hotel for a weekend, and kids coming and going and doing things. They could win prizes if they're, piece of artwork on the thing. But what it did, and the whole intent early on is obviously to get people to understand, one, the river's there. And it was amazing. I was talking earlier this afternoon. My first time I came down the river into Asheville, I was in a canoe. We had a bunch of scouts, and we got out underneath the high bridge. And went back home. I don't know, a couple weeks later, came back to find out, look where we got out and couldn't find the river. Nobody knew how to get down to the river. I said, well, if you go back to Biltmore Village, I think you take that road around and it comes around there and you eventually get down to the river. And it was really kind of interesting that, nobody really knew anything about it. If you floated down the river through the estate, you come out of the estate and there by the old car track, you could see all these cars that were sticking out of the bank. That's what they do with the ones that limped off or couldn't drive off the racetrack on Friday night. I guess they add them to the bank right there. Good, nice artwork. But it was really the whole build-up of starting with the children, trying to get their interest in the river and doing something, I think. And I'll give Karen a tremendous amount of credit for that, because she was able to talk a lot of people into doing a lot of things. And
Probably still is.
and really was the powerhouse in helping develop that community interest. And it's a community interest that's brought us today. The organization is still here for 30 years. You can physically see the improvements that are growing on the river. You can see the improvements in the water quality of the river, the image of it as it goes through the town. It's no one person did it, but there have been some very key people in this whole process over the years. I'm talking too much.
Karen, why don't you tell us a little about the hiring process and in your early years here?
And I'll back up anything you said.
Well, I remember I sort of arrived in Asheville, and I went to the chamber because I had started a chamber in the Middle East, and I thought I would only be here for a couple of years. My husband was transferred here from with GE, and I met Garrett Aldifer, and I said, I'm just looking for something to do for a couple of years. I'm going to be moving, and he said, oh, we have this river. I was like, oh yeah? And he said, yeah. I said, where is it? He said, it's the end of Patton Avenue. I was like, oh, okay. And he gave me a key to the building, to the chamber. And I was like, I went home that night and I talked to Bob and I said, I think I have a job.
When was that? What year?
That was 86 or 87,
Yeah,
something like
'cause
that.
it was early in the process.
Yeah. And then I met with all of you, and I think you had about 20 people to interview me to take this wonderful job that I was going to work out of my house with my own equipment, my own phone, my own everything. And you were going to pay me some princely sum.
Well, I literally, I think it was a $10,000
Yeah.
grant that the
Yeah.
city picked up.
What?
And we said, all right, if we do that part-time and you're on a straight contract, no
Oh.
W-2, and,
Well, $10,000 was a lot of money to us. Organization that was just, yeah. So we were fortunate.
What, 50 cents an hour?
Buck 298, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was fun, and I remember the interview saying to you all, I'm pretty good at raising money, but I don't want to go out and talk to groups. I don't know anything about this river, and I don't even know where it is yet. And I know the end of Patton Avenue is probably not the best answer. And you were like, oh, don't worry, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, but as a point of to that, part of the dilemma then was, as Luther said, where's the river? How do you get there from here, kind of a thing. And then from the Chamber's perspective, it's okay, we're going to develop the river, you got to have access, you got to have signage, you got to have wayfinding, you got to do an inventory of the physical resources and then come up with budgets for, because again, adaptive reuse was the password in Asheville at that time. That's what did the downtown. And we said, okay, so those are the things we need to address. Okay, it's 30 years later. Adaptive reuse has occurred. We still have problems with signage. We still have problems with access. We still have trouble with trying to get people to figure out how to get down on the river. So the continuum continues forward, even though so much has occurred down on the river. And now it's parking. I know. Parking was not an issue 30 years ago. And if the river wasn't up, parking was not an issue. That's the way it was.
Just to document what we had, because nobody really knew, we asked the local chapter of the AIA to help us, and we documented all the historic buildings, which created the transcript, if you will, to get an industrial historic designation for the river. And so we've lost several of those buildings, either through arson or through demolition. But we had that very first document that really helped us do that. The other thing that we did, and we just found this, and Elaine is here, and we did a flyover. We got an airplane, and we flew over the river from the airport all the way to Marshall to take a snapshot, because we said, we know we're going into a new era. We don't know how long that's going to take. We don't know, but we know that things are going to, that we need to capture what's here now. And we're going to have that video put onto a disc, and we'll be putting that on our website in the next couple of months as part of this 30-year look back. The other reason I think that Asheville was picked, as I recall, as the place to do the demonstration project was that this was where the river was most visible in the 4 counties. Transylvania County, it's mostly a national forest. Henderson County, it's mostly surrounded by private farmland. Here, it is pretty visible. It was the industrial corridor, and it is where the tax and population base is. So what you could do here, you would find every issue here, and then you could replicate it someplace else. You're going to find everything here. So I think that was another reason that you all focused in on, let's pick an area, do some things, because when we started talking about greenways, people didn't know what we were talking about. And the first greenway at French Broad River Park, and Luther helped design that, you know, it was a big deal. I don't know, was anybody here for the celebration of that? Yeah, okay. It was a pretty big deal. 21 gun salute from the ROTC, high school kids, and we had a board member who, her mother grew up, and she grew up on Bartlett Street, right up the street here, and the old Riverside Park was segregated, and her mother could never go to that park. Well, I remember her sitting in a lounge chair all day long. Remember Elizabeth? She sat on a lounge chair the whole day and was this smile from ear to ear, and she said, "It is so wonderful to be at a park celebration. Not only can I come to this park, because it's not segregated, but my daughter is on the board of the organization that helped make it happen." That was a big deal. You know, so it was, somebody asked about these murals in the back here, and when we built the playground at Carrier Park, we ran a daycare center. We had 1,000 people over 5 days who helped us build that playground. And for people to be able to come for the day and help, we had to take care of their kids. And so we had a whole bunch of people running the daycare center, and that's what they had the kids make. And you know, it's real special to have those. Just about everything, I would say, in the building has some story attached to it. Because we've never thrown anything out in 30 years.
Well, you didn't want to go in the river.
Yeah, just ask Elaine. So,
One day it'll be the museum.
right.
I'll turn it over to you, and if you've got any questions for these people, or any reminiscences that you have about the early days of the river and everything, we would welcome them.
I'd just like to point out, everybody knows where the river is now.
Mhm.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
And we come into town, and I'm somewhat new here, and said, "Well, where's the river?" I keep hearing about it. Everybody knew where to tell me to go.
And this is one of our volunteer drivers. He drives our monthly van for us right here.
RiverLink is now very much computerized, and they don't have newsletters, but when I came down here 23 years ago, I became the volunteer coordinator. And we stuffed envelopes, and we folded newsletters, and had to sort them by the post office rules. So, I mean, we have come a long, long way, not just on what happens on the river and how beautiful it is now, but what the whole organization as a whole has done, and how they have progressed. And it's just wonderful now that you can just go on the computer and check out everything that's going on, and you get newsletters. You don't have to, nobody has to stuff them or anything like that. So as having done all that, I can just say that we've made a lot of progress both places, in the office and on the river too.
Yeah, our whole database used to be on index cards. And that's how you did it.
You were talking about building access to the river in the 4 RiverLink counties. Is that how and when the Gene Webb Park came to be?
Yeah, Asheville was the only, if you've been up to Rosman and you go out 276, well, not at Rosman, at 276, there's an access park. And if you go down south of here to, towards past Woodfin, there's an access park. But within the city of Asheville, there was nothing. Just like you said, there was no access. And that kind of just happened because when I said we had River Fest, we under the Haywood Road Bridge, we decided we were going to have a River Fest, right, and use that area. And it was all just vines and poison ivy and, just nobody touched it. You could walk right under the bridge because there was no vegetation. But we started cleaning it up. We found a rock wall under there. We was, thought, oh, this is great. So we started pulling stuff out, and that area belonged to DOT, of course, on the right of way, and then CP&L, which was Progress Energy now. And when we got it all cleaned up for that particular River Fest, then CP&L let us have the part that they owned. So that's how we got the access part.
When did you build the steps there, the access there?
86.
And where is this?
Underneath the Haywood Park Bridge.
Well,
We go there.
okay, that was in
86, I think.
probably
Because that was here when Jim and I came down, we were looking for places
Right.
to paddle, and that was there then.
Right.
Yeah.
right.
And that, Gene, that really didn't just happen. Gene Webb led that effort, got the CBs involved, and got
that's
Bill
right.
Cecil Jr., who is
Yeah.
now president and CEO of Biltmore State, to bring over equipment and clean out with heavy equipment some of the debris that was there. And it was kudzu and poison ivy heaven.
Oh, it was.
And
yeah.
I remember the dedication, and you had no idea that it was going to be named Gene Webb Park, and the look on your face was just incredible, and everybody was so excited.
Well, and the rain was so bad. If you go on that road there's still kind of a puddle of rain, and so we took canoes and we're going in the puddle as part of the, as part of the entertainment for Riverfest. I mean, we've come a long way. Yeah.
I think the other thing that you did that year was on the ice house, you put a paddle wheel. The Millette family let us put the paddle wheel.
Say that.
And I really have been looking for pictures of that and have not been able to find them.
Right.
But it was another way to get people to go by and go, oh, that's pretty cool. And then Jim Brazel, who's down here, built Eiffel Towers. Does anybody remember seeing the Eiffel Towers that we put on the buildings? We had 3- and 4-story Eiffel Towers for an event that we called Fall in Love with the French Broad that we had in 91, 2, 3, 4. Then we had the big fire in 95. But Jim would build these huge Eiffel Towers that we would light, and you could see them from the bridge and from all over town. And they say Asheville was the Paris of the South and the French Broad River, and so we had this event called Fall in Love with the French Broad, and it was can-can dancers that were men that were elected officials. And I remember Lou Bissett was the mayor, and he was one of our can-can dancers, and he got a really bad cold, and he went around town telling everybody that he was never going to wear a dress again, that he got a cold. But we had, it was a time when the whole community was looking at the river in a very hopeful way and saying, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. We've got a plan. We know it's not going to happen overnight, but my gosh, it's a resource that we ought to be thinking about. What do you say?
Yeah, I think part of the best thing that's come out of the 30 years since this started is it's owned by us. Yeah, it wasn't, we didn't hire somebody from Chicago to come in here and tell us what needed to be done. It was done through, and I said this earlier, said it was created by locals. Some of the locals are like Gene, were born and raised here, and some of it was done by locals like me. I got local about 1984. That's when I came. And all of what's happened here has been driven by us, locals. And to me, I think, we're talking here 30 years and legacy statements and things like that. And my hope for the future, for the legacy of RiverLink, is 30 years from now, it's still controlled by locals doing what the locals think needs to be done to improve our quality of life, our economy, and who we are and how we live. Very good. Questions?
Well, I have a reminiscent.
Oh.
We used to have a business down
Oh,
here.
right.
It was called Nothing Wasted, and it was a mulch business before all those big, mulch, the stump dump came and all that. And RiverLink was our landlord.
Right.
And it was down across from where the river music is. And, I mean, we had a trailer and then a whole lot of piles of mulch. And we got robbed. I mean, we had this like ancient computer and somebody actually stole it. Imagine. And Hippie Tom lived in the silo
Oh, Hippie
on the
Tom,
other
right.
side of the tracks.
I forgot about Hippie
Which
Tom.
is where White Duck is now.
Yeah.
That side of the tracks. And Hippie Tom lived there. Every once in a while you would see Hippie Tom coming out of his silo.
With a ferret in a sack.
Yeah.
I was trying to get you to put your hand in the sack.
So, but for me, the most life-changing part was Karen introducing me to Wilma Dykeman and getting to interview her several times. And the thing that just sticks in my mind, I mean, she was wonderful and a lot of things stick in my mind, but the thing is that she, as a child, realized that this stream that went in front of her house went into the river, and then the river went into the ocean, and so we were connected. She was connected to the whole world from those little streams that started, up in the mountains.
Thank you. Gene, why don't you tell us about you? I remember you talking about one of the cleanups for the sheriff. There were some sheriffs on the bridge.
Well, this was in the earlier days when I don't think everybody appreciated the river, and a Boy Scout troop had come down the river, and they were at the bridge that was the Long Shoals Bridge, not the new one, the old one. And they'd come under the bridge and down, and as they came down, they heard a big loud splash, and they turned around, and there were two bicycles that somebody was throwing over the side of the railing of the bridge. And the scoutmaster, thought this would be a good lesson for the boys to follow through on this. So they went to the bank and saw a sheriff's car pull away from Henderson County. And so, there wasn't any other car. It was obvious that the people in this car had thrown the bikes in the river. So the scoutmaster decided, he was going to show the boys they were going to follow through. And they went to Henderson County and confronted the sheriff, and the deputies found out who they were, and they were pulled in, and they had to go clean up a section of the river. So,
Why were they throwing the bicycle?
oh, they said it was evidence, which...
So they were destroying evidence.
I mean, if your law enforcement feels that way, you're in trouble. Right. So the Boy Scouts learned a lesson.
Right.
One thing, a couple things we haven't mentioned, we've talked about the park, but some of y'all may not be aware, there was a program for water quality that RiverLink sponsored called Volunteer Water Information Network, VWIN. And I believe that we had people testing water. They would bring the bottles in, not here, but
Well, here, and then we'd have other people bring them to UNCA.
and at UNCA, in the environmental department, they tested them. And we had people in, all the counties here, and then you had some people in South Carolina also.
In Haywood County. And
Right.
Mitchell, we got it really going. We had about 300 sites.
So, we're trying to follow through on water quality. The UNCA picked up on that program themselves, and so we aren't dealing with it anymore. But I thought that was, interesting to know we had done that, and I think we were the first people around here that had done anything like that, right?
Well, it got so big actually that UNCA said, we're gonna hire somebody full-time just to do that. And so the program went to UNCA, and then they got a new chancellor at UNCA who said, why are we doing this? And stopped the program. So the VWIN program stopped for a couple of years, and it's been picked up. It's a much smaller program now by another nonprofit that was formed to do it.
Right.
But at one point, we had over 300 sites.
I'm new here, so I don't know if this question makes sense, but does RiverLink have a relationship or partnership with the industrial commercial complex geared towards just improving the overall aesthetic of the area itself?
Well, I don't know.
Two separate issues.
I don't know
I'm
that.
not sure we have an industrial complex
Yeah, I'm
in
not sure there's
Asheville.
one society.
Well, I mean, like all the businesses along the river, because certainly it has an intimate relationship with the river, so.
Well, the river when we started was all zoned heavy industrial, which meant you could have no residential and you really couldn't have retail. And we worked with all of the property owners down here, and that was everybody from the recyclers to the heavy industrial users to the junkyard owners,
Right.
to get the change to mixed use, which enabled it to expand in uses, which enabled residential things to happen, some retail things to happen, art studios to occur. This is not a town that any property owners like to be told what to do, at all. But right now, with the changes that are occurring and the road realignment that's happening, the Wilman-Dykeman Riverway is now attracted over $100 million in DOT funding. So it's really kind of happening. The city is talking about changing the zoning once again to form-based code, which really has to do not with uses, but with appearance. And so it would stay, my understanding is that it would stay mixed use so that you could pretty much have a variety of uses. It won't be a monoculture, but what you will have is some conformity in how it looks. But this is not a community that responds well to being told. Yeah, and I think the North Carolina legislation last year for the state said you really can't even zone for appearance. So there's some stuff going on at the state and local level. But we've had cooperation for moving slowly away from purely industry down here, from the property owners.
But by statute, RiverLink has got 2 seats on the Riverfront Development Commission. So we are tied in to the governmental structure that way. Yeah.
I mean, if you stop and think about, what's appropriate for the river. Well, you go back 100 years ago, and what was appropriate for the river was, you got tanneries and, things like that. And then now we're where we are today with like the RAD and things like that. But, we were talking about this earlier. At one time, we had the stockyards, all the farmers that were growing tobacco. Tobacco was a cash crop in western North Carolina. And they brought, the auction was at the stockyards. And, just what is the use of the river? And again, you go way back, the river was power. You use the river to generate power. So, I think the connections, both historically now and to the future, are pretty strong. You got a brewery investment on the river. That's a pretty heavy hit. But you can't zone for that because you don't know they're going to be there until it happens.
Well, I think, from being involved and listening to the community for 30-something years, I don't think the community visions the river to be a monoculture.
No.
I really don't. I think that there are different parts. You're a man of food bank. That's, there's a big box section down in part of the Swananoa River. It's not going away. But I think the neat thing has been that more and more people, businesses, entities have said, that greenway, that passage is not going to bother me. That's actually going to enhance whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's Manna Food Bank or Walmart even has a greenway out in front. That is going to be an enhancement to my business, and we don't all have to be in the same business. I think that's one of the strengths of the river, that it isn't a monoculture in a way.
But the economy really controls what happens. I mean, you know, it's that capital investment. I mean, what do we look at now? We say things like, well, you know, the arts community has taken a strong presence on the river, but as that popularity grows, then you have increasing values of land, and it changes hands, and then that creates disruption because, you know, the struggling artist, of course some artists are very successful, but the point is that changes the economic climate of what's happening on this river. Because like 30 years ago, property values down on the river were different. What did it say the other day with Mechanic Building?
Well, just to give you an idea of the property values, after the fire, the arson on the Cotton Mill property, okay, which was a 122,000 square foot building, a beautiful historic, beautiful building, to get money to do the cleanup, an 8,000 square foot building that was the last part of the cotton mill that was built was sold for $50,000. And that $50,000 was because nobody had insurance, was the money that was used to clean up the site and to sort of recover, if you will, from the arson. That building sold last year to two folks who came down here from New York. That was 8,000 square feet, just under 8,000 square feet for $1 million. So, I mean, the values of stuff have skyrocketed from when we started. Then that fire was on April 2nd, 1995, not that long ago.
You had a question.
Sorry.
I was curious, is there a short version that you can present for the Wilma Dykeman river plan and the creation of it, getting it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Is it too cumbersome?
Can you say something about it now?
Oh, something about now.
And I was wondering about, because it's vast, I was thinking of a short version. Is it possible?
Well, I think the short version is we looked at where the tax and population base was, Asheville. We looked at two rivers running through a city, and we looked at world-class attractions and could they become connected, and were they connected to the river, and did they form natural boundaries? And that's kind of how the boundaries of the Wilma Dykeman Riverway came. So the southern boundary is the North Carolina Arboretum, which is also at the Blue Ridge Parkway. The eastern boundary is on the Swananoa River, also on the Blue Ridge Parkway, headquarters. And then the northern boundary is at UNCA, the Botanical Gardens, and that phenomenal opportunity to connect to Madison County and the Appalachian Trail that crosses the French Broad River up there. I mean, ultimately, in 30 years, I hope that we all are wearing T-shirts that have the watershed on it, and it says from Maine to Manio. Because on the French Broad River, you could connect to the Appalachian Trail in Madison County on the French Broad River, come down here, connect to the Mountains to the Sea Trail on the Swananoa River, and you could go from Maine to Manio from the French Broad River watershed. The hard part's done. The hard part's done. You already can go from Maine to Madison County. And you can go from the Swananoa River to Manio, except for 40 miles. So we don't have that much left to do. And the DOT has discovered the river. There's over $100 million that's been appropriated to implement the Wilma Dykeman Riverway plan and to connect the two rivers, the downtown, West Asheville, and to begin to make this seamless so that it can become this incredible catalyst for expanding into the other counties and along the river and, really make that river link.
Well, I was just going to say, the other part of this is that there was all this work to clean up the river. Because when I came here, there was still straight piping.
Right.
And industrial waste going in there, and the landowners had to really also be re-educated that it wasn't just about their land, but this was gonna be good for them too.
And then the state of North Carolina created something called the Clean Water Management Trust Fund and started putting $100 million a year into different grant-funded, competitive, non-regulatory but carrot-based projects that addressed stormwater and addressed straight piping and addressed acquisition. And about 100 million of that in the last 15 years over that has come to the French Broad River watershed for projects, in addition to land and water conservation funds and other funds. So there's been a lot of money directed towards cleaning up the river and a lot of community awareness and involvement that has made a difference. It absolutely makes a difference. Mother Nature will clean it, will get healthy if we give her a chance.
Any other questions? Comments? Anything?
Where's all the salt go?
Pardon?
What?
Where does all the salt go?
Right into the river. Eventually, it all flows downhill.
No treatment.
I'd just love to hear any more personal reminiscences about how exciting it was when big pieces of this plan suddenly fell into place. I mean, I know it's been gradual, but each of you probably has one favorite story about, oh my God, here we go.
Well, let's start with Luther. Yeah.
And that way I can say me too when he gets
I don't know, I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I don't remember all the details, but the whole concept of getting land on the other side of the river, or access to land from,
Carolina Power and Light.
it's Duke Power now, what it
Yeah.
was? Whatever, the power company. That, they owned everything between the bridges on the other side. That's where we wanted to do something, and the fact that eventually they did sort of step up to the plate and say, yeah, here's the land. Now, obviously there were conditions relative to their power lines and that sort of stuff, which is public safety. But I think that was a major step, probably the first major step of a key player in the economy here to recognize what the potential is, and I'm sure they got a lot of good PR out of it as well. But all of a sudden we had this piece of property, and it was not the cleanest piece of property. And when you went through there, you want to make sure you had a good machete and wire cutters and what else. But it was interesting. It had been a dumping ground. Everybody could run up and need to get rid of something. I'm not going to pay to take it to the landfill. They just back in there real quick and dump it out. And we found all kinds of interesting things on the ground and in the ground as we started that process of building the park. But I know it took, I don't remember exactly how long all the talking and negotiating was with CP&L, but they came back to the table after we got the one thing started. Said, well, we think we might be able to give you all this, up here too, the easement to use it and so forth.
They just offered?
Huh?
They just offered without a request?
They understood, I
Yeah.
think, the potential. And Charles Dyson was the general manager, and they actually had I don't know that people know this, they actually had a contract to sell the property to the local radio station, WSKY. And they wanted it to put a radio tower on because it was, apparently the floodplain is really good for conductivity for radio towers. I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm just repeating something. And when we approached Charlie Dyson, he got it. He understood the value of the river and the potential for the community. And he got out of that contract. How he did that, I don't know. And said, I'm just going to give this to you because I do think that this is important, and you need a place to actually implement all the stuff you've done. And it's at the confluence of two rivers. It's a natural place to start. There's natural energy there. And yeah, they It wasn't their idea to give it to us, but when we approached them, they understood and they got it. Charlie Dyson was instrumental in that.
In that time frame, for folks that weren't here then,
Right.
the power structure in Asheville and Buncombe County was in a much smaller
Oh my God.
concentric circle.
Right.
And if you could make your point with Charlie Dyson and,
Ernest
again,
Ferguson.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there was 20 of them, or whatever the number was. But, there was a core group of movers and shakers
Right.
that could move and could shake.
Right.
And that drove a lot of things.
Well,
It
and
really
the other
did.
thing that they did for us, if you remember, is they hosted 3 business lunches for us,
Mhm.
for the business community, and they were paid for by Wachovia Bank and Carolina Car and Light, and it was an opportunity. They invited their customers, their friends, the boys, it was mostly the boys, in to hear about this potential for the river. And that was big. That was a big endorsement because these were the serious guys.
Yeah.
At that particular time, there were serious guys who made things happen in the city. But having them sort of anointed and endorse it made a difference.
Well, to answer your question, I think we all were thrilled with the French Broad River Park finished, and because it's classy, and that's what we want everything else to be. But probably one of the most traumatic, and it's certainly it's the most used park in the city, was getting the Speedway and Carrier Park. And Karen took the brunt of all of that, and the trauma was, people said we were having a class warfare, but that area is used all the time, and to me it was just such a thrill to see it really come with the playground and the velodrome. And one fellow that has a restaurant in Asheville and is kind of good-natured, grumpy, used to always say, "Oh, y'all gonna never do this," His grandson was down doing a roller skating, derby thing. And he said, "That's the best place you've got," So, things do come around. And I'd just like to add, seeing the evolution of the board, and, when we first started, we had our hearts in the right place, but we were struggling, and we didn't have the know-how, and we didn't have the right people. We had some good paddlers, but now it thrills me that RiverLink has, for several years, has had boards that are well respected and people that know how to get things done. And I'm sure it's a help to Karen, So that evolution to me is almost as important as the physical playgrounds, because we're at a level that we need to be. So
I guess, and again, I'll go back where I came in from. The focus originally was to include economic development, and if you look at what's happened, and we touched on this, the park taking over the Speedway, building that, the Confluence Park, set a stage for, and then we had the brownfields where, the stockyards and that were, and now we have, I don't know what the investment is, $100 million investment in Belgium coming in, and I realize whenever there's a change, that creates change issues, traffic issues and trucks and everything else, but that investment is good for Asheville and Buncombe County, because that's tax base and that's jobs, and I may retire someday, but right now I still need the day job, and a lot of folks like me in Buncombe County, and but that wouldn't have happened if all those pieces to where that company and their vision was, they recognized that, their slogan is, fat tire and everybody riding bicycles. And if we'd had the old riverfront, then they wouldn't have been attracted. So, again, from that perspective, the chamber 30 years ago said, well, we ought to figure out a way to make some attractions down on the river. And obviously, the chamber right through that period, and those that are there now with economic development and capital investment, work to get the brewery in place down there. So, to me, I mean, what's it going to be like 30 years from now? I don't know what will be. If you'd have told me 15 years ago, per capita consumption of craft brew is where it is today, I'd have said, you're nuts, But there it is. So, but to me, that's a key example of what the timeline accomplished.
Any other questions?
Karen, tell them about the saga of our water tower.
Oh. Well, if you just look at this poster, that was the poster from, I believe it was the second, but it might have been the first studio stroll. And, there's only 3 buildings on it, and there were 14 artists down here. And our symbol was the water tower, and it was at the cotton mill. And people used to say, I don't know how to get to the river. We'd say, oh, just follow the water tower. Just keep going towards the water tower and you'll find it. After the fire, the arson on April 2nd, 1995, the cotton mill was destroyed, and the heat from the fire was so intense that it melted railroad tracks around there that had to be replaced, and the water tower became destabilized. And that really was our icon. If you look at our early icons, it was water towers and herons, blue herons. And we had to take it down. And it was heartbreaking to do that. And I found some pictures the other day of us having this dismantled. And I remember it cost $14,000 to take it down, which was a huge amount of money. It was heartbreaking to do. And lo and behold, Mr. Brazel is at an art show in Chicago visiting his daughter and buys a replica of the water tower that an artist had taken pieces of the metal from it and reformed and sold, and I have it still in my house, of a replica of the water tower from an artist that was down here. Which is really kind of neat. And we actually had that as part of our exhibit for the art show that we did in October, as one of the remnants of some of the things that are going on down here. So it had another life, which was great. It got recycled by artists. But that was how we told people to find us. And you could see it from the bridge, you could see it from downtown, you could see it from West Asheville, and it was the thing that we used to define the river.
You had a question?
Yeah, I think there was a 100-year-old postcard in the paper today of the scenic Swannanoa. And I looked at that and I said, that's a beautiful picture. And I said, but I don't think of the Swannanoa as being scenic.
Right.
And then the thought occurred to me, no one ever thought the French Broad through Asheville would ever be considered scenic. And it was a dream that you all kept alive despite what everyone...
Well, the DOT has funded the Swannanoa River project that has Thompson Street on one side and Swannanoa River on the other, and the plan is to have greenways and walkways on both sides.
Fabulous.
And to have those be 2 pairs. The engineered plans that I've looked at from the DOT aren't exactly that, but we got to keep working on that. The money's been appropriated to do the design and some of the acquisition, but the Swannanoa can be that.
It can be, that's the next step.
And it can connect to Biltmore Village, and Biltmore Village, for as lovely as it is not that pedestrian friendly, actually. But this could really open that up through the first industrial corridor that we had in the city of Asheville, Coons Development, which really is nothing now. It has no identity. So there's a tremendous, we're just at the beginning in many ways. And I think you all know our representative, John Ager, Here, thrilled to have you here with us,
If I can
John.
help with the DOT, maybe that's something I can do.
Well, yeah, we need to talk. Now we got the money, now we need to refine the plan.
Love the way you think. You're a miracle maker.
Well, we appreciate what you're doing and Raleigh.
Well, I think we all owe these pioneers a big hand for all of this. And thank you all for coming, and remember, there's going to be 11 more of these this year, going over everything about RiverLink.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment that as I was sitting here listening to all these wonderful stories, realizing there were probably a million more, that I see in a room of visionary people, and we just wanted to say thank you so much. And I also want to know who's writing the book.
I'm writing the book, and you can buy your way out of it. I want to thank everybody for coming. We're really excited about this program. We're very excited. Justin down there, Young, is one of our AmeriCorps members, and he has done our logo, as Dick said, and our artwork. You're going to see different artwork every month, and you're going to see our 30-year celebration on everything that we send out. And we hope that you will come back and celebrate with us, because there's lots of stories to be told, and we're excited about it. And really appreciate you being here. We have a couple of board members here. Paul, you want to stand up? And Denise? And Fred? And am I missing? Jim, you were? Marilyn, you were? Anybody else here?
Me?
Yeah,
Yeah, we were all board members.
You're a board member.
Else is a volunteer, stand up.
Everybody else, you will soon be a board member as soon as she gets around to you.
So thank you very much. It's great to have you here. And here's to another 30 years.
Yeah, I did a Karen. We can stand here and talk about what's happened, but how it happened is the folks on the other side of the table. That's how it happened.
Right.